Okay, and welcome to part 4, which is what I'm calling hiding the plates. This is a lot of anecdotal stuff. Again, I'm just trying to give you some extra stories, maybe some opinions. So take it the way you want to take it. This is the early histories, some sort of side notes, some other podcasts that I've gleaned from to maybe fill in about some of this stuff, because we're not really going to get into it too much as we move forward. Our next episodes are going to be a lot more about the translation process, Oliver Cowdery, so forth and so on. Anyway, we get something here from Lucy Mack Smith's history. So once people knew that there were these gold plates, they wanted them for money. They wanted them to prove that Joseph was a fraud. They wanted them for whatever reason they wanted them. And again, I think it's very legitimate that people would be like, no, show us the plates. Like, you say you have them, show them to us. Like, I think it's a legitimate thing to ask. And you can go ask the creators of South Park. They did a whole episode about this, which is pretty funny. The only thing I would disagree with Matt and Trey about on their depiction would be that they keep saying, Lucy Harris, smart, Martin Harris, dumb to dumb. Lucy Harris kind of got a little wacky too. So anyway, everybody was kind of in a frenzy over this whole thing. So enough about South Park. Let's move on to the Joseph Smith papers. So a little bit about a man named Willard Chase. And this is a name that you may or may not have heard before, but this shows up in Lucy Mack's history. And you're going to see this kind of tie into a couple of other stories that I've gleaned as well. So here you go, Lucy Mack Smith's history. Quote, one Willard Chase, a Methodist class leader at their head, and that was the most ridiculous. So I love it how she calls him ridiculous. They had sent for a conjurer to come 60 miles to divine the place where the record was deposited by magic art. We were apprehensive that the plates were taken out, and so the plates were taken out and secreted somewhere. And we were somewhat uneasy lest they might, like Moses, who was hid in the bulrushes, be discovered by our enemies. So, because they think Joseph has the devil, they go get a conjurer from 60 miles away to find the plates for them. And it gets pretty crazy after that. What I find interesting, and I'm trying to do this in order, so this may not make a lot of sense, but this is the order in which we get them from the Joseph Smith papers, from Lucy Mack's history, is we start talking about seer stones. So this conjurer also has a stone, and also something that's interesting here, and I'm not sure who this is, but there is a daughter who has a seer stone, and Joseph uses that seer stone to find the seer stone that is used to translate the Book of Mormon. And what I found interesting, because I was looking, and one of the reasons why I found this funny, is because I was looking through just Google. I was just Googling this whole idea, and I found this. Somebody is asking that thinks that Mormonism was based on a stolen rock, and that rock needs to be returned back to the Harris family. I'm not sure where they got that from. The best that I could come up with was that there was this is from the Follow Him podcast. I'm going to quote somebody else here for a second. They're talking about there's a court case against Joseph Smith, and let me see if I can find it. There was a girl in Palmyra named Sally Chase who had a seer stone herself, and I asked if I could look at her seer stone. When I looked at her seer stone, I saw this seer stone by a river next to Lake Erie. I asked permission for my parents if I could go and get it, and they said yes. So I traveled to Lake Erie, and I found it right where I had seen it in Sally Chase's stone. I polished it off, put it at the bottom of a hat, and looked at it, and I could see anything. And so, again, thank you to the Follow Him podcast. Apparently, that's from a court transcript. But this whole idea of seer stones and conjurers, this was not, like, uncommon. So I guess the fact that he found it in a well and just kind of stole it is one way to look at it. The other one is that, he borrowed somebody's seer stone, gave it back, and he was able to use that to kind of look under the earth, apparently upwards to like 10 feet under the earth, which is why he went looking for an old silver mine. And he could find these objects, and that's how he found the seer stone that we have today, and that was published when they put out the printer's manuscript of the Book of Mormon. So anyway, just kind of part of the culture back then. So I'm gonna leave off that and kind of return here. So another one that I found really interesting during this time. So the plates are there. People are getting conjurers. There's some accusations that Joseph Smith had stolen things from Sally Chase. And then we get to this. And I'm sorry if this is timeline's all over, but this is just the order in which they gave it. So here's another one from Lucy's history, Joseph Smith's mother's history. Joseph kept the Urim and Thummim constantly about his person, and he could by this means ascertain at any moment whether or if the plates were in danger. Never heard that one before. I don't know if they buzzed or lit up or if he just kept looking at them over and over again, but that's how he would find out if they were in danger. And because there's a lot of stories about him like bursting into the house and being like, there's a mob coming or something like that. And he was right. And they would move the plate somewhere else and so forth. So one story that's kind of fun, and just kind of as a side note, I was actually a performer in this film. So if you've ever seen the Work in the Glory movie, the first Work in the Glory movie, they actually depict this. So if you ever want to watch it, this is actually filmed there. Yeah, it gets kind of crazy. And I was able to corroborate this through a comic book that the church has put out, which I didn't know about. Or maybe I should say a graphic novel. Comic book sounds silly, but a graphic novel that they made, I think for children is my guess. Anyway, so here's from Lucy Mack Smith's history again. So, quote, when Hiram came, Joseph requested that he or him to bring a chest that had a good lock and key and have it here immediately so that it may be ready. Said Joseph, by the time I get home, having left these directions, he went to bring the record which he had deposited in the cavity of a birch log 3 miles distant and covered it with the bark of the same. He took the plates from their place and wrapping them in his linen frock, put them under his arm and started for home or the house. After walking a short distance in the road, he concluded it would be safer to go across through the woods. In that moment, he struck through the timber where there was a large windfall to cross. He had not proceeded far in this direction till upon as he was jumping over the log, a man sprang up and gave him a heavy blow with a gun. Joseph struck and leveled him to the ground and ran at the top of his speed about a half a mile farther. He was met again in precisely the same way. He soon brought this one down and also ran on again. But before he got home, he was accosted the third time, in which a severe stroke with a gun. When he struck the last one, he dislocated his thumb, which, however, he did not notice till he came inside of the house, where he threw himself down in a corner of the fence to recover his breath. And as soon as he could get on, he rose and finished his race for the house, where he arrived altogether speechless from fright and exhaustion after a moment's rest. He said, Mother, tell and send Carlos for father and Mr. Knight and his friend and tell them to go and see if they can find some men who have been pursuing me. He then let Carlos go and go tell Hiram to bring the chest. So that's, again, I'm reading from her thing. But he basically gets like hit with the butt of a gun twice that we know of. He punches a guy so hard he dislocates his thumb. In the Work in the Glory film, he apparently like uses the gold plates and like smacks the guy in the head with it, which probably would have killed him. But anyway, it's awesome. Of course, the Steed family is involved in that. But anyway, I don't want to hawk that movie too much, but it's awesome. Anyway, so yeah, a dislocated thumb. And from this graphic novel, you can see in this like whatever second panel down, third panel down, that it talks about Joseph having his thumb dislocated. So I looked into that. Lucy Mack Smith's history, hard to say, says this. He went out and related his adventure to his father and Mr. Knight, who had come back from their scouting expedition, right, to see if they could find the guys, without seeing anyone. He showed his thumb again, saying, I must stop talking, Father, and get you to put my thumb in place, for it is very painful. So when this was done, when Joseph Sr. snaps the guy's thumb back into place again, he related to our guests the whole history of the record, which interested them very much, and listened and believed all that was told them. So he's like, can you guys hang on for a second? Snap, puts his thumb back into place. Ouch. Okay, I'm good. Let me tell you a little bit about the Book of Mormon. Just these people, like the hits keep coming, literally keep coming. So that's one of the ways that he tried to save the plates, is they actually like attacked him. They got a conjurer to come and find the plates. So one story that we get, again, Lucy Mack's history. She shares a story. This is going forward a little bit, but she says the first thing to be attended to was to secrete the record and breastplate. It was resolved that a portion of the hearth should be taken up, and the plates buried under the same, and the hearth relayed to prevent suspicion. This was carefully and speedily done, and the hearth was scarcely laid down when a large company of men came rushing up to the house armed with guns. Joseph threw the door open, and taking a hint from the stratagem of his grandfather Mac, or Solomon Mac Sr., he hallooed as if he had a legion at his command, giving the word of command with great importance, and in a tone like, I'm not sure what this is, stentor at the same time. The males that belonged to the house, from the father down to little Carlos, or Don Carlos Smith, ran out with such vehemence upon the men that they thought it best to give leg, bail, while they were able, and fled, and were pursued by our little Spartan band away into the woods and dispersed themselves to their several homes. Again, this is Lucy Mack's history, but I kind of hope this is true, because it's like, hey guys, go get them. And like, this little kid is running as well as all these other guys, and they're basically faking that there's an army protecting them, and these guys get scared and bail. I just find that funny. So anyway, that's Lucy Mack's story. We then get another one. A little further on, he says, we had but few days' rest, however, for Joseph soon received another intimation, maybe from the Urim and Thummim on his person, we don't know, of the approach of a mob and the necessity of removing the record and breastplate again from its hiding place. He took it, or them, up and carried it, or them, out to a copper shop across the road, and took them out of the box, and after wrapping them carefully in cloths, laid them away in the midst of a quantity of flax, which was stowed in the shop loft. He then nailed up the box as before, and tore up the floor, and put the box under it. As soon as it was dark, the mob came on and ransacked the place, but it did not come into the house. After making a satisfactory research, they went away the next morning. So the next morning, we found the floor of the copper shop taken up, and the wooden box which was put under it split into pieces. And in a few days, we learned the cause of this last move and why their curiosity led them in. This direction, a young woman who was sister to Willard Chase, maybe this is Sally Chase, we don't know, had found a green glass, and by looking through, she could see many wonderful things, and among the rest of her discoveries, she said she had found out the exact place where Joe Smith kept his gold Bible hid. So in pursuance to her directions, they gathered their forces and laid siege to the copper shop, but went away disappointed. But this did not shake their confidence in Miss Chase, for they still went from place to place by her suggestion, determined to get possession of the object of their research. So, believe it or not, if this history account is true, this woman has a stone that she could see stuff in. How on earth would you know that Joseph went to a copper shop and they tore up the floorboards and busted open this box? So I guess this stone worked, because they were super close to finding these plates. Whether you believe in that stuff or not, that's the story that we're being told by all these contemporaries. Anyway, apparently, and I love the downplayed language of this. It's like, well, because of all this, we thought it best that we'll move to Harmony, Pennsylvania to do the translation. Okay. So that's what they do. And there's kind of a famous story, and I forget where it falls in the timeline. I've left it out for now, but that Joseph kind of puts it in the bottom of a barrel of beans. And some people are like, hey, you're Joe Smith. You have a gold Bible. And where is it? And he's like, I'll bet it's in that barrel of beans. He's like, well, you're not going to dump this out. And he starts slowly moving the beans over. And after a while, they get impatient and leave. So they wind up making it to Harmony. And Oliver Cowdery eventually shows up and serves as the scribe for the majority of the translation, which will be our next episode. So just a little of the wacky stories that we're told about hiding these plates. So again, this has been Filling in the History. I'm the amateur historian. I hope you've enjoyed this. Share it with your friends if you like it. It's been a lot of work to put these together, but I appreciate the positive feedback that you guys have given. It means a lot. But yeah. Enjoy, and we will see you next week.